Welcome back to Control the Freak podcast, where we talk about all things control freak related, whether you're a controlling person who wants help to understand the things you do and how to stop it, or you live with or know somebody else who's a controlling person and you want to understand either how to navigate that behaviour or know when and how to extract yourself from it. My name's Sean Johnson. Hopefully you're going to learn what you need to learn through this series of videos. I'm going to walk you through all of the above. On with today's episode. So I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day, which I suppose to some people would make me all kind of ist and faux, but I don't subscribe to that. And as usual on Joe Rogan, he's very interested in the human psyche, what drives us. And he was having a conversation with a guy called Chris Williamson, who's an ex-Love Islander, but who's now a very successful podcaster. I think he's got over 3 million subscribers on YouTube alone, never mind the other platforms. So he's doing very well. And Rogan's had him on several times. And they inevitably got round to the subject of martial arts, as generally does with Joe Rogan, either comedy or martial arts. And they spoke about Rogan's drive for excellence in martial arts and physicality, really. And Rogan offered the explanation that he never wanted to be a loser. He was always kind of conscious of feeling like a loser. And Williamson said, "Where did that come from?" And Rogan kind of shrugged and went, "I don't know, maybe it was my parents' divorce or moving around a lot when I was a kid." And if you think about it, that would do a lot to unsettle a young mind, boy or girl, really. And you can imagine how we could have felt like a loser in that scenario. Back in those days, divorce wasn't anything like as common as it is now. So there might have been some stigma attached to that. He might have been judged by his peers or his peers' parents. He possibly even blamed himself, I don't know, but there might have been some kind of, it's my fault that this has all gone wrong. And then there's the moving around and the constantly having to meet new people and make new friends and being the outsider. You can see how this could have made somebody feel like a loser. Now, I'm not suggesting or even trying to diagnose Joe Rogan here. I've never met the guy, and only he could really say if these were his events. But it would kind of make sense. You could make a fairly good guess that these were significant events for him that made him focus on something he could become quite good at. Now, he was also very scared of confrontation. He was worried about bullies. He was quite a small fella. So he started learning martial arts and getting into exercise. And he obsessed about it because he became good at it very, very quickly. That was something that was within his control. So he focused a lot on that. And he got to the stage where he even had a following and people would follow him and go to his fights and things like that. So again, there's a reinforcement there. And you could see how that might become a result of losing control and how he'd focus on something that he could grab control back from. But it made me think I never got back round to the subject of long-term influence events. I spoke a little bit about it in my story. And obviously, I'll keep dipping in and out of that subject. People will start popping up and you'll go, okay, that's a long-term influence event, control freak. I thought I'd break it down for you a little bit more this episode in a little bit more detail. So I've got a couple of stories for you. The first one to kind of highlight and really kind of encapsulate a long-term event control freak, or a long-term influence event control freak, should I say. Good example is Monica from Friends. Now, Monica's story is that she was a very overweight child and teenager. She was very clumsy. She was very naive. She used to break things quite a lot because of her size and just because she was just a bit of an oaf, really. And they even had a saying for her called pulling a Monica, which was just inevitably just getting something wrong, just messing something up. And her parents even had this saying for her. She had a sibling who was kind of average. He was kind of average looking. He was averagely popular, not extremely popular. But he didn't particularly stand out for any reason, certainly not for failure. In fact, at school, he was quite successful. He got lots of awards, and his parents kind of prized these rewards, or awards, should I say. And there was quite a telling episode. I can't remember what season it was now, but there's a flood in the parents' garage, and they end up using Monica's old memories and bric-a-brac to kind of shore up the flood so that it didn't damage Ross's awards. It's quite telling, isn't it? They thought that was a suitable sacrifice to make, to sacrifice Monica's stuff to save Ross's stuff. There's a constant undermining of confidence there. As she grows older and she loses weight, she becomes quite attractive. She moves on a little bit in life and she decides she wants to become a chef. She's very good at food and she's decided that that's something that she can take some control of. But even then, she starts a catering company and her mum hires her to do a party at their house. But of course, while she's there, her mum's hovering around and she's kind of judging her recipes and her methods. And inevitably, something goes wrong, even though it's not Monica's fault. And it's at that point that her mum says, well, it's a good job I've got some frozen lasagna that she's put to one side because she expected Monica to pull a Monica to get it wrong. All the way through this time, Monica's become very neurotic and very needy. With her friends, she's incredibly needy and she expects them to accommodate her neuroses. So she's got things like she has to have the towels in a certain order. She's going on about rings, coffee rings on tables. She has to sleep on a certain side of the bed. And it's not just kind of a cutesy thing that a lot of girls have going, oh, that's my side of the bed. For her, there's all kinds of reasons about where the sun comes up and stuff like that. She's very, very needy. And needy people, I've seen this lots of times in needy long-term event control freaks. They become quite repellent to people, or people tend to target them. If people sense that you're needy, they tend to make you a focus and you're an easy target for them to feel good about themselves by treating you badly. So when she gets a job as a reasonably kind of high-class chef, she's quite successful. Her neediness comes across to her staff. So even then they lock her in a fridge, they ignore her, they bully her. And it takes her a long time to kind of work her way through this to become reasonably successful and leave a lot of that stuff behind. She has to have a supportive partner and supportive friends to do it. Her parents are a bit of a mixed bag. Her mum is a bit of a battle axe. She's incredibly undermining. She kind of sneers and looks down her nose at Monica. And as I say, she's always expecting her to fail. And there's quite cutting remarks there all of the time about Monica's appearance and the things that she can do. Her dad's a bit of an oaf. He's got a bit of a foot in mouth syndrome. He can't stop himself saying stuff. And he thinks he's just being honest. Possibly he even thinks he's being helpful. But he's honest to the point of insult. And Monica will always go through her brother to try and get something out of her mum and dad just because of the way they treat her. She's very nervous of her parents. And as I say, for the long-term influence control freak, they tend to have a couple of things that they can focus on that become theirs. And for hers, it's the cooking and the cleaning. Now, I knew somebody a little bit like Monica, certainly as far as the cleaning's concerned. Now, this guy, he wasn't overweight. He was a reasonably presentable guy. In fact, he was very, very neat. He had a few friends, but he kind of kept himself to himself. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was boring, but he wasn't. He was a really, really nice guy, but he was very reserved. If you got his clothes dirty, he'd lose his mind. Now, as I say, he was presentable. He had the creases in the right place. His hair was always gelled. He was very, very neat. And when we got older and he got a job, all of his money went on his presentation. It was always a new outfit every week. Even though he didn't really socialise, he always had to look very, very smart. He was even worse with his car. He was obsessive about his car. There was many a lost afternoon sat on his driveway waiting for him to finish cleaning his car so that we could go out for a drive. And in the end, I'd just go home for my tea because you'd be sat there for hours and he'd forget you were there. He was so engrossed in it. He'd be washing, polishing, waxing, hoovering. He even had little brushes for his air vents. And he'd do it all again the next day or the day after that. He couldn't bear the sight of dirt. Everything had to be tip-top for this guy. I thought it was just a bit of a quirk of his. But when I look back and I think about his parents, it kind of all falls into place a little bit more. His mum was a bit more like Monica's, but not with the comedy attached to it. His mum was very, very sneering and put down and judgmental of him and his brother, in fact. I never saw this lady smile. Now, she was always all right with me, but I always had a good relationship with my friends' parents. I was always better with adults, really. And these guys were more than just an inconvenience to her. These guys were in the way. If they spoke to her, it was like who are you? Why are you talking to me? Very dismissive and very cutting in her remarks to them and her judgments. And again, if she saw they got their clothes dirty, she'd get very, very angry about it. His dad was different again. He was a little bit of an oaf, but in the most lovable way. He was a lovely fella. He was always very smiley, sort of pink nose, pink cheeks, and stuff like that. And he shuffled about. He wasn't around very often, but when he was always in a great mood and he was very, very nice. But I worked out why a few years later. Now, when I used to go around to my friend's house and we hung around in the garage, there was always bottles and bottles of wine, and it was kind of presented that this was a hobby, that he was, home brewing for something to do. But actually, he was well known amongst older people, and certainly as I got older, as somebody who had quite a bit of a drinking problem. And that explains the good mood and the red nose and the red cheeks and the shuffling about. But that was also a source of tension between the two. The mum seemed to kind of begrudge his presence a lot of the time, even when he wasn't there very often. When he was there, she begrudged it. So there was obviously a lot of friction between those two. And it kind of confirms why my friend was the way he was, that he chose something he had some control over. Because in the house, there was lots of friction between his parents. That was evident even at the time. But also that he couldn't put a foot right. He never had a clear set of rules that he could follow and understand. Anything could set his mum off if she was in the wrong kind of mood, and she always seemed to be in the wrong kind of mood. So again, that kind of explains the long-term influence of looking for something, one or two things that's theirs to hold, theirs to control, and they're very, very happy in that space. And when you think about how he'd get very angry if somebody got his clothes dirty and you couldn't eat in his car, he would get very, very angry about that, almost to the point of, you thought, what's wrong with you? Why are you reacting like that? Very clear to me now what was going on there. There was another guy I knew around the time. Now, this guy in the story I've just told hated this guy, absolutely loathed him, and used to fantasize about hurting this guy. And he wasn't alone in that. This guy was possibly the most loathed person I've ever known. Even now, 40 years later, he's the most loathed person I've ever known. He was repellent in every sense. Even the unpopular children couldn't stand this guy. They didn't want to be around him. He was sneaky, he was snivelly, he was kind of unkempt, he was kind of small and scruffy. There was nothing whatsoever attractive about this guy's personality or being in his company, and he was shunned outright. Every now and again, he'd try and kind of ingratiate himself with groups of people, and in no uncertain terms, he was rejected. Sometimes violently as well. He got lots of slaps and punches. He was just an absolute outcast. It didn't help that he had an obsession about planes. He was obsessed with planes to the point of annoyance, and it kind of only reinforced the geeky side of this guy that was so repellent to people, as well as the sneakiness. That it was just like, this guy's weird, get him away from us. Turns out he shared this love of planes with his dad. And they used to go off watching planes together or looking for planes together. And they shared this quite closely, this obsession. But it was kind of the only thing that they did share. The dad was a real ogre, apparently. Very, very angry with his son all of the time. His son couldn't put a foot right. So you've got this dynamic of, socially, this kid has got no friends whatsoever. And even his dad had no time for him unless they were doing the thing that his dad enjoyed doing, which was planes. His mum was a bit of a helicopter mum. She was there all of the time and she doted on her boy, and she was very, very protective, almost too protective. But, when you hear what I've just told you about what this kid was going through, you can understand why she would kind of shower him with love. Didn't help him very much, but I understand it. Round about his mid-teens, I think 13, 14, this guy found his dad in bed with somebody, so the story goes. His dad was always having an affair, but he caught him this time. And his dad said to him on no uncertain terms, you tell your mum, you're going to get it. So now he's got this event He's found his dad in bed with another woman, and he's got to keep this secret from the one person who will protect him. And he's been given this task by the person who's kind of got no time for him, but holds a lot of power over him. Awful lot of pressure there, isn't there? There were stories going around about this guy as well, this young lad, that he was being very inappropriate with younger people. If it was girls, he was giving them the wrong kind of attention, much younger girls as well. And if it was younger boys, he was trying to bully them. He was trying to get some control wherever he could. And of course, it could only be with younger, smaller people, because anyone his age or above was going to hurt him. So these stories started to pop up, and they didn't help. So he was getting attacked for things like that as well. As we got older and we left school, I started hearing more stories about him. His name would pop up now and again, and there were stories of much younger girlfriends. I think he got one of them pregnant as well. And there were stories of police involvement. He was getting lots of dead-end jobs as well. He was turning out to be the loser everybody thought he was going to be. Going back to Joe Rogan, the loser thing, he was turning out to be that guy. He disappeared off the scene anyway. Years later, I've moved down to London and I'm getting the newspaper on my way to work. There'd been a case in the news that had captured the public's attention about a murder, a double murder of two young girls. And they'd caught somebody, arrested somebody, charged them with it. So I've opened the newspaper and I can see this photograph, and then the story is giving this guy's background, and it says where he's from. And where I'm from, it's a very small area. I thought, well, he's about my age and he's from that area. I must know him. So I've kind of looked from the words, looked back to the face, looked back to the words again, and then it's hit me who it was. It's this guy in this story, and this guy's name was Ian Huntley. And he turned out to be the horrible person that we all kind of knew that he was, really. The story goes that after all of this police involvement up where we're from, he managed to secure a caretaker's job, a school caretaker's job, down at a school in Soham, and he'd lied to them about his police report and they never checked. He'd also got his partner a job as a teaching assistant, and this lady's name was Maxine Carr. And they'd lived down there kind of without much fuss for a couple of years, but after a little while, Maxine Carr lost her job as a teacher's assistant. And she was pretty sad about it, and she went home to visit some friends. But in the meantime, there's two young girls, Holly and Jessica, who've had a party round at their parents' house, and they've gone off for a walk after the party, and they thought, well, we'll swing by Miss Carr's house to tell her how sorry we are that she's left or that she's lost a job. When they get there, Huntley's outside cleaning his car or something, and they've said they wanted to say goodbye to Miss Carr. And the story goes that he lied and said she was inside, and those poor girls never came out alive again. I won't go into the details of what he did to them, but he's a monster. And then, like a lot of control freaks that do these kind of things, they try and control the narrative. So after that, he made sure he was pictured in lots of photographs and stories, and he even made sure he was interviewed on the TV, and he's trying to kind of change or affect the narrative of what's going on to deflect it away from him. But even some of the journalists who interviewed him at the time said there's something not right about this guy. They knew, not necessarily that he killed the girls, but that there was something deeply wrong about this guy. And as I say, within a couple of days, he was arrested and fingered for killing those poor young girls. Another story about him that I almost forgot there, with his parents. We were around about 17, 18, and I used to live opposite a pub, and in this pub was a long wooden bar. And his mum and dad had split up at that point. His dad had got another girlfriend, and his mum had got a boyfriend. And this night, he and his brother, who was completely normal, by the way, he was reasonably popular, had a girlfriend, well-liked, normal kid. They stood in the middle of this bar, these two boys, and at that end of the bar is Huntley's dad and his new girlfriend, and right at the other end of the bar is his mum and her new boyfriend, and they seem to be in competition to out inappropriate each other. dad with his tongue down this woman's throat and his hands all over her, and the mum is kind of doing the same at the other end of the bar. And these two boys are stood in the middle of it. Now, this is a very small town, and everybody knew each other, and everybody knew what was going on. And it was probably the one and only time I felt sorry for Huntley, that he had to watch his parents behave like that in such a small community, and everybody knew what was going on. I say it was awful. But I've struggled to have sympathy for Huntley, even after telling that story of what he went through, etc., etc. Part of me thinks, did we all just have it right all along? As I say, he was the most repellent creature, and I hope he burns in hell, quite frankly. Anyway, hopefully that story with the moniker and my friend with his car washing and his clothes cleaning obsession will give you some kind of idea as to the long-term impact of constant undermining of somebody's self-esteem, and how they'll tend to focus on one or two things that they can grab control of, and they'll protect it. He was very protective with his planes thing, Huntley, and he obviously tried to get control with younger, weaker people where he could. My friend with the cleaning, that was his thing. You couldn't take it away from him. But with Monica, it was cleaning and cooking. Hopefully that gives you a little bit better explanation. Before I go, I want to remind you about Am I the Control Freak? Drop it down in the comments here, or I don't know if you can do it on Instagram. Can you leave comments on Instagram? I don't know, but there's Instagram and Twitter and what have you. In the meantime, I'll leave you with the usual. Control the freak, not other people. See you next time. Behave.